Magic the Gathering has been around for a while, and several of its mechanics come across as noticeably flawed when viewed in a modern TCG design lens. The example that most likely comes to mind first is the land system. Both drawing too many lands and drawing too few lands will inevitably cost players games in a way that they have very little control over. Even decks with perfect mana ratios can still get screwed or flooded. However, Wizards has had plenty of time to correct this flaw, such as by designing lands that can double as creatures or spells, or by adjusting mulligan rules, or just by adding more consistency boosting effects like Scry. And while Wizards has made some adjustments over time, they've been relatively minor. When it comes to the possibility of getting screwed or flooded, they appear to be largely okay with the current status quo. One of the first videos I put on this channel was about the benefits that randomness can bring to games, and Wizards seems to be of the opinion that lands are adding a desirable level of randomness to Magic. So while I do believe that lands are definitely a flawed mechanic, it's not the most problematic mechanic in the game. That dubious honor belongs to Magic's combat system. It's a bit harder to spot the flaws in the combat system because its flavor is so resonant and logical. You're sending your creatures to attack the opponent, and the opponent must then decide how to send their own forces to intercept them. Creatures that are off attacking or focused on something else aren't close enough to you to defend you when the opponent inevitably gets their turn to deploy their own attackers. Flavorfully, this makes a lot of sense. However, mechanically, the end result of this system is a dangerously stagnant play pattern. If each player plays out lands turn after turn naturally, then each player will have a steadily increasing pool of resources to play bigger and more impactful spells. This is good, as it creates escalation in the game as it progresses from the first move through to the conclusion. However, if you take this similar play pattern and take it over to the combat system, playing out a 1-cost creature on turn 1, a 2-cost creature on turn 2, a 3-cost creature on turn 3, and so on, then the end result that you're going to be faced with is that absolutely nothing happens. Because the defending player is able to choose where to allocate their defenses and is able to deploy multiple creatures to team up on a single attacker by double blocking, they will always have the most favorable matchups against any opposing attackers. And the fact that creatures that have tapped to attack are removed from the pool of available defenders means that players are disincentivized from committing creatures to an attack in the first place. If both players play out similar creatures and spells at a similar rate, the end result is a stalemate, with neither player attacking and neither player getting any closer to winning. The only real breaker Magic has to make sure that the game actually ends in the event of a stall is the deck out rule. Eventually one player is going to lose when they run out of cards to draw. Given that Magic decks are 60 cards and players are only drawing 1 card per turn, this can take a very long time. More realistically, players are usually going to end games by leaning on an alternative game system to overtake the opponent, most often by building up an advantage in card economy and then leveraging that advantage to close out the game. Unlike lands, which are viewed as a feature and not a bug of the game design, Magic designers have been fighting against their stagnant combat system since the very first set of the game. Even in Alpha, keyword abilities like flying, protection, landwalk, and even banding all exist as ways to allow the player to attack more easily by minimizing how the opponent is able to use their creatures to interfere with the attack. Combat tricks like giant growth and instant speed removal like Terror also negate some of the advantages the defender has, mostly in the field of double blocking. If the opponent goes to double block and you have one of these abilities, you can open up the blocker to getting 2 of the cards destroyed at the cost of a single low-cost trick from the attacker. Powerful, efficient removal like Terror also helps in another way by allowing players to trade card advantage into board advantage more easily. It's much easier to set up an attack by weakening the opponent's board than it is to set up an attack by strengthening your own board. Even up to the present day, the selection of card effects included in each and every set of the game continue to fight against the natural play pattern of the combat system. All of this isn't to say that Magic the Gathering is a complete disaster of a game. Indeed, by this point, Magic has more or less learned how to live with this combat system, and it uses card abilities like evasion, instant speed interaction, and card advantage in order to break out the stalls that tend to pop up in the game. That being said, Magic is definitely not the only combat system out there, and there are many games that have paid attention to the flaws in Magic's combat system and have made alternative combat systems which largely look to avoid Magic the Gathering's problems with parity stalls. I'll cover some of these solutions and alternatives in a future video. Until then, have a great day and best of luck ending your card game without getting bogged down into a stall.